With NHL training camps just about a month away, we start to look ahead to the 2024-2025 season. Who are some of the early Calder Trophy candidates, and who do we think is going to win the award? We've got that and more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Friday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you can get new episodes as soon as they drop. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. With the playoffs in our rearview mirror in the NHL and the NBA, we just don't have as many games as we used to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Happy Friday, Rachel. We have made it through another week.
We did, although, I don't know, the weather's been kind of nuts out east, so barely, we'll say.
Yes, we kind of had to swim our way through most of this week here in the New York metropolitan area, remnants of tropical storms coming through, but we will survive and getting closer and closer to the opening of training camps.
Yeah, and with that, of course, we start thinking about all the new rookies that will be playing in the league this year. And then when you do that, of course, you think, I wonder who's going to win the Calder this year. It is way too early to be having this conversation, but we're going to have it because it's always fun to kind of look at it with like no data to back you up other than what they've done in the past. And none of these guys have played head-to-head at the NHL level yet, or not none, but very few. We do have a couple with some games experience, but I think it's going to be a real interesting race this year. It is not a Connor Bedard year where it just felt, foretold from initial puck drop. I feel like there's a lot of options this season.
Yeah, it's a little more wide open. I mean, you went into last year and you thought, okay, unless Connor Bedard suffers a major injury, he's probably the runaway favorite to win the award. He did suffer an injury or two and still won the award.
I know.
So I think that, that was borne out by what ended up happening. And now, as you mentioned, we haven't seen many of these guys play in the NHL. The ones we've seen have made little cameo appearances, so to speak. We're basing this on reputation, junior statistics or college statistics or foreign statistics, scouting reports, the role they're going to play. There are a lot of things we can take into consideration, but there's a lot more we don't know than what we do know.
Yeah, and also what we do know is the recent history of the Calder Trophy and who's gotten it over the last 10 or 15 years. And, what it has taken to get that award. And, if you go back the last 15 years or so, first off, it takes to the year before that in 2008, 2009 for a goaltender to win this award. That was Steve Mason when he was with the Columbus Blue Jackets. And he played in 61 games that season with 33 wins. And it's really hard for a rookie to get that many starts. Right.
Yeah.
At the NHL level. So that's why it's really hard for a goalie to win, right?
Well, it requires a lot of trust by your coaching staff or a team that just doesn't have many alternatives.
Well, that's true, too.
And both may have been the case with Steve Mason in Columbus. But, it is difficult for a goalie to get that award for that reason. And that's why it's been a while. I mean, other goalies have won it. Evgeny Nabokov, Andrew Raycroft, but it has been increasingly rare, as you pointed out, for goalies to make it. And I think forwards in general have a little bit of an edge over defensemen because they can put up flashier numbers.
Yeah. So you look at the last 15 years, we've got 7 centers, 4 wingers, and then 4 defensemen that have won this award. And Moritz Seider was the last defenseman to win the award in 21-22. Cale Makar, of course, won it in his rookie year. But the average age of a Calder winner of those last 15 years, 20.13 years. So, you look at Connor Bedard, and he's the only 18-year-old of the entire batch of 15. There's a bunch of 19-year-olds, who entered the league in their draft plus, later than their draft plus 1 year. But I think that, it's real hard for an 18-year-old to win this as well.
It is. And, you're essentially
And
a
also won
teenager.
it at 18.
Yeah. You're a teenager going up against men. That is, not an easy thing to do. And, so often when we're evaluating hockey players, you talk about, putting on some muscle and maturing physically. And that's not done when you're 18 years old. So, sometimes these guys need a little time to mature physically, and that helps them play better hockey.
Yeah, it absolutely does. But like I said, this should be a real interesting race because, you have like a bunch of different contenders. You got to start out with the Sharks, right? Because you've got Macklin Celebrini, who was the number 1 pick in the draft this past year. But you also have a dark horse candidate in Will Smith, who was a pick from the previous year. I believe 4th overall in the 2023 draft. So the Sharks have a couple of contenders here, right?
They do. And it will be very interesting to see, how that plays out. And I know they are very high on Will Smith, and I think rightfully so with regard to that. And, the question again becomes, how ready is he? And how much ice time will he get? We know the Sharks are in full rebuild mode. So, he should, if he's able to play well, get that opportunity to be on the ice and to do some good things.
Right. Well, and the other question will come up if they're on the same line for some reason, are they going to help each other, or does that negate each other's skills? Is it because of the other one on their line? I mean, it does bring up those sorts of questions, but I will say, I'm super high on Will Smith. One of the players I was most interested in that draft, and just a phenomenal part of the U.S. national team development program, and then went off to college at BC, had a tremendous year with 71 points in 41 games, just ridiculous.
Yeah. And, more than an assist per game, 25 goals in those 41 games. And yeah, I would tend to think if they do play together, they may help each other statistically, but split the vote.
Right. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, it could be, unless one of them statistically is that much ahead of the other, in which case I guess it minimizes the potential split. But I am really high on Will Smith as well. Again, 19 years old, will turn 20 in March. Listed right now at 181 pounds. So again, at 6 feet, 181, does he need a little bit more time to fill out his frame to be that effective? I get the feeling he may be very effective as a rookie and yet go on to even bigger and better things in a couple of years after that.
Yeah, and I'm willing to bet he's put on a little bit of muscle this summer and is much bigger and stronger than that at the moment. As Macklin Celebrini probably is too,
What they're doing right now over the summer, part of it is almost certainly, working out to try to put on weight. And look, Celebrini, far and away the top, consensus first overall pick in this year's draft. And, I think the Sharks are really looking forward to seeing what he can do.
Listen, I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do with the Sharks. So Yeah, it'll be really fun to have like a BC and a BU guy partnering up to do great things in San Jose.
Yeah, should be. And again, the Sharks, as we said, in a full rebuild, but starting to turn the corner a little bit, starting to make progress with all the picks and prospects that they have accumulated over the last few years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Little light at the end of the tunnel. We've got a lot more candidates to discuss when it comes to the 2025 Calder Trophy. We'll get down to different categories of candidates, our picks for the finalists and the winner. All that and more coming up on today's Locked On NHL podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. So your next category, Rachel, after we covered the Sharks.
Then we look at the rest of the league except for the Russians. We're going to get to the Russians a little bit later. And I think, the conversation has to begin, I think, with Cutter Gauthier in Anaheim. And unfortunately, I know a lot about Cutter Gauthier because he was a Flyers draft pick that, things didn't work out. So the Flyers made a trade with Anaheim, and Jamie Drysdale came over to my Flyers, and the rights to Cutter Gauthier went to Anaheim. He signed there. He played in one game this past season, and he's a BC guy. I feel like we're only talking about Boston College and Boston University. I know.
And he's a point-a-game player in the NHL already.
Yep. So, I think, obviously he's a really strong player. He had 65 points in 41 games at Boston College. Another huge part of the U.S. national team development program and the World Juniors this past year. And I think that he's just a big impact player, and he's huge, and he has a great shot. So he has the potential to put up a lot of points this season. He'll get a lot of ice time on Anaheim for sure.
Yeah, Anaheim also in that rebuild, and Gauthier now being one of those players they are going to build around. I think he has a very, very good opportunity he's going to be in the top six, and he's probably going to see substantial ice time and power play time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you have Lane Hutson, I would say, a BU guy. Once again, we're sticking with Boston.
Can we get out of Boston at all?
I know. 49 points in 38 games for BU, and got to play 2 games with the Montreal Canadiens this past season. So obviously he's still eligible. And I just, again, like with a team that's in the spot that Montreal is in, Hudson's going to have a lot of ice time and a lot of opportunity here.
He is. And, here is a guy who, again, had that cup of coffee at the end of the season with 2 games, 2 assists in those 2 games, and more than a point-a-game player both of his years at BU. So not bad at all. Considering the position he plays and the chances that he'll have on the ice in Montreal, got to be considered a strong candidate.
Yeah. Now, obviously with him being a defenseman, the chances go down a little bit. And he's going to have some competition on the defensive side of things from Zeev Bayum who was just drafted by the Minnesota Wild, who looks like he could get a ticket direct to the NHL this year.
I think he will. And I am looking forward to seeing what he can do. And, also, here's the guy who did not go to BU or BC,
Woohoo!
University of Denver guy,
Yeah.
11 goals, 50 points in 42 games at U of D. And again, someone who won't turn 19 until December. I am very excited to see what he can do. And I know, the Minnesota Wild are kind of a team in a little bit of transition right now, but I think he's going to play a solid role on this team. And by the end of the year, I think he could really be seeing a lot of ice time.
Yeah. And I think, obviously for defensemen, like you were saying, the adjustment is a little more difficult, and, getting to read at NHL speed, read plays is a bit of a challenge. So I think, it may be a little bumpy at first, but if he could get it going the way he has over his career, in college and with the national team, I think he could have a really strong rookie season and really make a name for himself. I think he's definitely more of a long shot to win this award, but as far as being in consideration amongst potential rookie defensemen, I think absolutely.
Yeah, and while being a defenseman may make him a little more of a long shot, I get the feeling like 5 years from now we will be talking about him a heck of a lot.
Yeah, and then another guy, Logan Stankoven for the Stars. Now, this is a really weird situation because he played 24 games for the Dallas Stars last season, and that's one less than would negate eligibility for the Calder this year. And so I do see the potential of voters being salty about that and just not giving him the points, or like voting for him further down, for fourth or fifth place or something like that, just because they feel like it's a bit of a cheat.
Yeah, I mean, there could be some voters who don't give him the benefit of the doubt, and it may be up to Stankoven to just have such a strong season that he cannot be denied. Here's a guy who, with the AHL Texas Stars, had 57 points in 47 games, 24 of those goals, and then goes up to the NHL and still has 6 goals, 14 points in 24 games. And keep in mind, he's a small guy. He's only 5'8", and yet he has, learned how to play and be effective offensively despite that lack of size. As he adjusts to the NHL, as he gets a little stronger, he'll probably be even better. I like this kid's potential, but I think that he is maybe a little bit more of a long shot for the Calder this year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that, there's other guys that are going to really overtake him in terms of the flashiness. We could see a sophomore slump here
Yeah.
with him. And I just think between all of that and, again, voters getting salty about it, I think that his chances are a little bit less.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Who is next on your list?
Well, we've got the Russians, I think, which is a whole other scenario, right? Of coming over from the KHL, which is a men's league, playing against, tough players who are much older, much bigger. It's overall a little bit of a slower league than the NHL, but still the competition that these guys have already seen, I think, is a lot stronger than what some of the North American players have seen. And, of course, I'm going to put at the top of that list Matvei Michkov from the Philadelphia Flyers,
Right.
who is 19. He's over 2 years earlier than the Flyers expected due to being let go from his contract over there. And so he's going to be with the Flyers this season. I think he has a big adjustment that he's going to have to make. I'm really expecting this season to be a little rocky for him, but in a good way, in a learning way,
Right.
where he'll be able to develop. But who knows? I mean, he could blow it out of the water when all is said and done. For Sochi last year, he had 41 points in 47 games, which for the KHL is really freaking good.
It is. But then how do those goals translate to the NHL? There are a lot of adjustments he has to make living in a new country where he doesn't speak the language,
Mhm.
the size of the rinks, the style of play, all of that tends to make Russians coming to the North America a little bit iffy at first. And then it's a question of how quickly does he adjust? Are there other players in the community in Philadelphia who would, be able to help him make that adjustment?
Oh, for sure. So, Igor Zamula, the
Right.
defenseman on the team, is Russian, and there's, a Russian coach that has been helping out as well. And it is interesting though, because if you look again at the last 15 years of Calder winners, the Russians that have won it were Kirill Kaprizov and Artemi Panarin. How old were each of them when they won? 24.
Yep.
And that, they stayed in the KHL and developed over there more years before coming over. And that's where I see, the, potential weakness of Matvei Michkov. And it's not, there's nothing he's doing wrong. It's just that
Oh
he's
no.
younger and less developed. And I think that the reason why Kaprizov and Panarin were able to dominate in those years is because they had more years under their belt playing adults and
Yeah.
grown men over in the KHL.
Yeah, and it does make a difference. It is not an easy transition, and yeah, I think that he is. I mean, I have seen some places consider him the favorite to win the Calder. I think he's going to get off to a little bit of a slow start, but by the end of the season, we're going to see why he was considered
Yeah.
such a big prospect.
Yep. I think so too.
Any other Russians that you want to mention right now?
Well, there's one from your New York Islanders we should probably talk about.
Yeah, Maxim Siplakov, 31 goals, which was fourth in the KHL last year. I guess the big question is, where will he fit in with the New York Islanders? I've heard second line. I've heard third line. Lou Lamoriello did say we did not sign him to send him to the to Bridgeport, to the AHL. But, he's 25 years old, made the eligibility by how much did you say?
4 days.
4 days, yes, for his birthday to make that cutoff to be Calder eligible. I don't know. He had that one breakout year last year from Moscow Spartak, and I guess the question becomes what kind of a role he has on the Islanders. I would consider Tsiplakov a long shot. And again, to me, the key is making that adjustment and finding the right role for him. He will get a chance to ascend to the top six. The Islanders don't have six legitimate established top six forwards right now on their roster. But how quickly he earns it, I think, will be the key to whether or not he is a Calder Trophy, strong consideration to win that Calder.
Yeah, and then I think kind of a side note possibility is Nikolai Kovalenko, who's with the Colorado Avalanche. And I think it'll depend on ice time for him, and that'll depend on the injury situations in Colorado. So I think there's a lot of factors to consider there, but he was a really strong player in the KHL, 0.91 points per game over there, which is really good. Again, I think the chances are less, but he's got to be in the conversation.
Yep, got to mention him for sure. All right, well, we're going to start talking a little bit more about who we think the finalists might be, who we think the winner is going to be. We've got that and a lot more coming up on this episode of the Locked On NHL podcast.
I love sports. I love them so much. I never want them to stop. And we are in full swing for all those summer sports like baseball and soccer. We absolutely miss hockey, but FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets every time I'm in the mood. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a booster bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. FanDuel has odds for Major League Baseball, the Olympics, the WNBA, soccer, and so much more. So head over to fanduel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball.
All right, so we've mentioned a lot of the candidates. Anyone else you want to mention before we start talking finalists?
Yeah, so we mentioned goaltending and why it's so hard for that to happen. The one name that I've seen, tossed around that I think has maybe the most chance of being in the conversation is Dustin Wolf of the Flames, only because I think there's the greatest chance of him getting the number of games necessary in order to be in consideration. He's played NHL games for the last couple of seasons, but not enough to be out of eligibility. He had 17 games last season with an .893 save percentage, 3.16 goals against average. I don't know. I think he's going to have to get the starts and do really, really well. But
Yeah,
other
and
than him, I'm not sure there's like a real strong goalie
and
contender.
then how good is the team in front of him going to be is, I guess, the other
Mhm.
question, and that may not help his candidacy.
Yeah. So I would leave him out of the finalist conversation for now. And, you know, narrowing all those names that we've talked about down to 3 is a really tough conversation. I, I really think my gut says Will Smith is going to be one of them.
Yeah, I have Will Smith as one of my 3 finalists as well. And I also have Macklin Celebrini on my list. How about you?
Yeah, I think they both will. I just think that there's going to be enough votes going either way, like 1-2 or 2-1, depending on it. I just think they both have so much potential and are going to get a ton of ice time. And I just can't see either one of them faltering. I think it'll be really good to have them competing sort of against each other while on the same team for this. I think
Yeah,
it'll help both of them.
sort of a friendly rivalry going internally for the San Jose Sharks.
Yeah, and I have a really difficult time with the 3rd slot because, I wanna say Matvei Michkov, but also I don't wanna jinx it at all. So, part of me says I want it to be Cutter Gauthier to jinx Cutter Gauthier, but but who do you have
I
as
have
the
Cutter
3rd slot?
Gauthier
Yeah, yeah,
edging out
uh-huh.
Matvei Michkov. It's close. I just think the fact that Gauthier is not making the adjustment from Russia to North America will give him a little bit more of a faster start and allow him to be the 3rd finalist. What are you sticking with Gauthier also?
I think so. Although, part of me does want to include a defenseman in the conversation. And so, I think Zeev Bayum is going to be my borderline defenseman that could crack the top 3. But maybe we'll end up in 4th or 5th.
We shall see. It is going to be interesting, and I think it's a lot more fun when there is no one clear cut, head and shoulders above everybody
Yeah.
else candidate. It gives us a little more to watch and to keep our interest going. So if you have to pick one, as of right now, the winner is
I'm sticking with Will Smith. I just
sticking
have
with him.
to.
Okay,
I
okay.
have to.
I hear you, and I really like the potential of Will Smith, but you know what? I am going to go the other way. I am basically going to say that Macklin Celebrini gets it partially because of the fact that he is the first overall pick, and I
Yeah.
think some voters are just going to be inclined to vote that way in a close, very close bit of balloting. So we'll see how this one works out.
Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to eating all of my words from this show. What is it, 8 months from now?
Yeah. So save this show and send
Please
it back
don't.
to us in
Please
8 months.
don't.
Someone could get injured and the whole thing just
Uh,
blows up. But yeah, no
oh, I
question
know.
about that.
Please
Well,
no. Yeah.
thank you for making Locked On NHL, your first listen today. Now go check out Locked On NHL Prospects, where you can get the lowdown on some of the great players who, in fact, may be competing for the Calder Trophy this year, or people who are competing to be drafted next year in the NHL. You'll get expertise on the prospects of all 32 NHL teams and potential draft picks coming up for next season. So it's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I will be back on Monday interviewing 3 of our local hosts about the biggest stories from around the league. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great weekend, everybody. Stay safe, and thanks for listening to and watching the Locked On NHL podcast.